Hey everybody, Stephen Clyde here from the Peace and Liberty podcast. This is episode 2. I'm here with my very good friend Dan here. We've been good friends for over a year now. He is the owner of the site Anarchy.com, which is a site dedicated to Anarcho-Capitalism and the Rothbardian tradition, which is identical to my views, if we're being honest. But he has a BA in psychology, and he's been all over the internet spreading the idea of liberty to people. So it's pretty safe to say we became instant friends when we started talking. So in fact, there's so much I got to say about this guy that because I promised him he'd be my first guest on my show because he really earned this. So it was really him that jump-started me in my path to not only reading and absorbing these authors, but giving me an outlet to write and put my ideas in the paragraphs and eventually books. And I'm, believe it or not, working on 2 books right now. I never, ever would have thought I'd be able to do that. So like I said, he owns actualanarchy.com, which we'll link to. His other side project is super interesting. It's called The Last Nighters. Dan does movie reviews from a Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist perspective with his friend Robert. Robert's an awesome guy. Don't get to talk to him that much because he doesn't have too good of an internet. But I love the guy, so hopefully I can get Robert on sometime. But it doesn't end there. Dan created this website called readrothbard.com, which is dedicated to all the work Murray Rothbard has put out. And he has an unbelievable collection of videos, which he sourced from all over the place. It's quite a treat. But there's more. He has another site attached to that called the Rothbard Repository, in which you can literally type in a subject line and it will take you to certain points in Murray Rothbard's speeches where he talks about it. So I can't imagine how long it took him to do that. I'm scared to ask. I never have. So you can find that at readrothbard.repository.com. And again, we'll link to all that other stuff. Dan's probably got a few more links for us. So thanks for coming on, Dan.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited for your show. You have a very professional looking setup, and I hope that you do very well.
Oh, thanks a bunch, man. You witnessed me set all this up over the course of months, and obviously I had a lot of setbacks. I mean, I remember maybe it was like a month ago or a few weeks ago, I was like, damn, like I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Like I've had too many pitfalls, and it felt like I'm not going to be able to start. But you kept supporting me, and everybody else kept giving me kind words, so I really appreciate that. But I guess to start this off, I know about you, but let's tell the world about you. How did you get into libertarianism? You've mentioned a lot of your family members are libertarians, which a lot of people come from like leftists or, conservative families. You actually have anarchist family members. So tell me about that and just tell me about your background.
Well, I'm not so good about talking about myself. I'm a bit shy, a little nervous, like a schoolgirl on this. But I actually did grow up in a left-leaning type household. My extended family, relatives, and whatnot are on both ends of the spectrum. So some pretty right-wing conservative Christian types, and then some pretty left-wing, not like smash things up socialists, but the compassionate, bleeding heart types who think that taxation is the price we pay for compassion to help the downtrodden and the less fortunate. I grew up in that environment of feeling the compassion, and my right-wing uncle always said that, when you're younger, if you're not a Democrat, you don't have a heart. But if you're growing up and you're older, and you're not a Republican by then you don't have a brain. Now, I like to think that I'm a third path, and that is, I think that the initiation of violence against peaceful people is inherently wrong, and so that pretty much rules out all monopoly justice providers in a geographic area, aka a state or a government.
Hey,
so,
how about that?
Yeah, how about that? So my path, basically, like I said, I was left-leaning growing up. I went to college, liberal arts college, and it just is sort of an echo chamber even back when I was in school, and I can only imagine how much worse it is now. With social media, you see so much more. But they had protests about everything all the time. And I was always thinking, if they could just focus on one thing, they might actually make an impact. But, they were protesting Save the Whales over here and women's rights over there and anti-racism over on this other corner in the main square at the university. And slight tangent, but you mentioned I do a bunch of websites, and there's even more right now. And other projects. I think focus is a key, and so that's one of the things that I'm working on now is getting my attention down to just a couple of key things because I've been trying to spread myself a little bit too far, a little bit too thin.
Oh no, it took me forever to do the show notes page because I mean, like, damn, like if I said everything you do, it would take me like full 10 minutes. So I had to like really like trim it down to a few things. But yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, that you gave a pretty good intro. But how did you get into libertarianism in that? Can you think back and like what was your first experience with liberty? Because if you listen to my first episode, I talk about, you know, my father when I was a few years old would ask me, you know, how would you like it if you needed permission from the government to go do things? And that just inherently stuck with me. What was it for you?
Well, I've kind of always been fighting against authority, just even in my own mind. You know, like school was not a great fun experience for me. Even though I did okay, you know, I did well in school, but I found ways to make it easier to not have to go as much and still do well. So I'd like to think that I have always sort of had this bent to me that is anti-authoritarian, but it didn't really get any finer points on it until I heard about Ron Paul in 2007, 2008. Of course, Barack Obama was like the darling, media darling, and everyone loved him. But I kept finding this Ron Paul guy very interesting. And then my college roommate of all things, you know, we had been in college back in the late 90s, early 2000s. He was a refugee from Eritrea. They were having a civil war with Ethiopia, and he immigrated to the United States when he was like 10 or 11 years old and ended up at school with me. And we kept in contact, and then I started mentioning, you know, Ron Paul and things to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've run into the same guy, and I really like him. By the way, you should also check out this other guy, Steph Molyneux, and Murray Rothbard, and Mises." And so it just sort of started this snowball effect. And then I also got into prepping quite a bit during the housing bubble, and I like to think that I saw it coming, like 2003, 2004, and I started talking to my family about it, and many of them are in real estate, and they thought I was crazy. Turns out I was right, by the way. But then the, you know, financial crisis happened, and I was like, you know what, I want to move to an island. I want to get like prepper style, get a couple of years worth of food. So my wife and I, we moved to an island, and I thought I would have all this extra time. So I signed up for the Mises Institute 52-week course in Austrian economics, which I now do with a group, including yourself, called the Rothbard Roundtable. And that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would like to just plug that real quick because we've always been trying to get more people to come in, but you know, me, you, and like two other people were the only people nerdy enough to spend a Saturday afternoon doing an economics lecture for 52 weeks. So if anyone else is listening, please reach out to me or Dan and we'll help you get linked up to the Rothbard Roundtable group. We'd love to have you. We always have a great conversation. We have a guy named Dennis Foster who I'm actually going to have Dennis on. I think he's going to be on in about 2 weeks from now. But he's an Austrian economist teacher, and he teaches in I think a New Mexico college, if I'm not Arizona or New Mexico. I always forget the states, but well, I'm going to have him on, and he's a great guy. So we'd love to have you in there. But what's the link for that one again? How can we? Maybe we can just reach out to you, Dan.
Yeah, that's a Facebook group, and it's actually private or secret at the moment. So they would have to get invite only. It's very exclusive.
Oh yeah. So just reach out to us, and we'll do the background check. All right, but all right. So I this is a question I've always wanted to ask you, and I don't think I ever did. Were you ever a leftist? Did you ever hold any opinions that you now look back and were like, wow, I was a communist on that area? Because me and you joke around that, you know, pretty much anything, you know, left of Murray Rothbard's a communist. You know, we joke about that, but literally, what was it for you?
Well, you know, I had this kind of compassionate leftist upbringing, but like I said, not smashing windows or things like that. I think it was just the typical, you know, people need help, and the best way to do that is to have a coercive entity go and force you to give money at gunpoint. And you don't question that at the time because it's how things are done. I do recall having conversations with my more conservative uncle, and he would say things like, oh, what do you think about taxes, and are they too high, and who should be paying them? And I always thought, well, I'm a young guy and, in college or whatever at the time, I don't have very much money, so I can't pay the taxes. I think that people should pay based on the ability to pay, sort of this progressive taxation model just in my head. And it made sense at the time because, I think it was Willie Sutton. He was the guy who went and robbed banks, and they asked him, "Hey, why are you robbing the banks?" He says, "Well, that's where the money is." So, that was my thinking at the time. Like, well, if taxes are a given, it's going to happen, right? They always say the only things certain in life are taxation and death, or death and taxes. That, if the taxes must be paid, then the people who have money would be the ones paying them. I, of course, don't agree with that any longer, but that was probably my most pro-communist thinking.
Actual anarchy. No rulers, not no rules. Tell us about that.
Well, so Robert and I had been having conversations for a long time and working on various projects, and we wanted to basically start a show, start a podcast, and we started it as the Read Rothbard podcast. And it was generally just conversation, talking about events of the day, things that we were doing anyway, and you just, hit record and decide to publish it out. And we kind of grew up watching a lot of movies and sort of getting into that movie speak, where you use movie quotes to illustrate a point or to converse. And I had many of my friends where we could speak solely in movie speak, solely in quotes. And so many of our conversations would get into movies, and we decided that after a while we wanted to focus the show on just being about movies. But we also ran into this problem that no one knew who Rothbard was.
Oh boy, that's a problem that I'm trying to eradicate the world of that problem. Me and you both. So
yeah, I agree. But as a result of that, we decided to rebrand, and we threw a bunch of names around that we thought might be interesting. And I suggested Actual Anarchy, and Robert really liked that one. And it has a nice meaning to it, because most people typically think of anarchy as violence and destruction and chaos. And exactly. I sent you a meme earlier today, and it essentially illustrates that if people are going around smashing things and acting like violent shitheads and calling themselves anarchists, then of course people are going to think that anarchists are violent shitheads.
And left anarchists want to claim that there's no such thing as property, but they want to claim the title of anarchist is their property, that the left owns it. And it's, well, what do you do about that?
Right. So expect a lot of hate mail on this one, a lot of hate comments.
Oh yeah. Oh buddy, bring it.
Yeah, but so that's why it kind of worked for that, because we were like, okay, well, we're going to tell people what anarchy actually is. And it's just, like you said, no rulers, not no rules. It's market-based, it's voluntarist, and it's about individualism and personal freedom. And we've since evolved even further, because we built up a nice audience. We interact, we've had a lot of guests, but it was taking a lot of work. Like we talked about a work-life balance, I think earlier. I was spending hours and hours editing. So we decided to shorten the show, make it more of a straight take and not have guests, and then also do a normie friendly version that doesn't have the quote unquote anarchy stink to it. So right. That was where the Last Nighters comes in. And essentially it's the same exact recording minus the front and the back end. And we publish that out on YouTube and on a website, lastnighters.com.
Yeah, man. I mean, the world really owes you something for what you've done, because I mean, you don't give yourself enough credit oftentimes. But man, there's so much we could talk about. I guess another thing I want to talk about is when people think of anarchy, or when you talk about anarchy to, let's say, a conservative, they'll say you need laws, and it's like, we're not talking about not having any laws. We're talking about not having any rulers. Anarchy, the prefix "an" means no, and archy means rulers. So we're talking about no rulers. Have you personally found a way to get this across to people more simply? I mean, I do my best, but I think, yeah, at some point, anarchy just does have this stink where it's hard to get over that fact. And, you can see my colors behind me. I can't hide what I really believe, but yeah, if I talk to somebody who, I can tell they're going to be like that about the word anarchy, I'm just going to pretend like I'm an anarchist and just kind of work my way up. I mean, I don't know if you're more principled and you're just like, nah, I just tell people what I believe, but
well, it's been an evolution for me. there's a lot of things I want to say right now, but one of the tactics that I really like is what Larkin Rose teaches in his Candles in the Dark seminars. So essentially, you're getting the person you're conversing with to confront cognitive dissonance within themselves. And so you're not in a confrontation with them. You're in there showing them, you agree on certain outcomes that you desire, and then you show them how what their actions or what they're proposing is actually counter to that. But you kind of just get it to the point where they have to not even acknowledge it. They just have to kind of not be able to answer that question themselves. And we get into it with a fellow member of the Libertarian Union, and I believe you're a member now. And it's one of my things I want to talk about a lot more on this if we have time.
Oh, yeah.
But Patrick McFarlane from Liberty Weekly, we talked with him about our experience, Robert and I, at the Larkin Rose event, and that can be found at libertyweekly.net/26. It's really good.
We'll link to that.
All right, excellent. And if I can just plug the Libertarian Union right now, is probably my most favorite accomplishment right now, and that is essentially it was a throwaway URL. I was getting the Tom Woods deal. I already had actualanarchy.com, but I got my hosting through the Tom Woods link, and they give you a free URL when you sign up. So I was like, what's a good one I can get? Libertarian Union, sure, why not? And I had envisioned that it would be like a chapter by chapter, like different geographic areas. We'd be like Libertarian Union local, like 451 or whatever. But that never really took off. But I had seen this podcast station that I believe Roger Paxton puts together, and it's Pax Libertas. And it's like a half dozen or so different podcast creators that are all in this like same community working together and sharing ideas and being guests on each other's shows. And they have like a single website that directs all that around. So I decided to turn Libertarian Union into that. And so now we have, I think, 11 or 12 different providers. So we have content for days. We've got Foreign Policy Focus, Liberty Weekly, the Peace and Liberty podcast, the Actual Anarchy podcast, Battle for Liberty, Don't Waste Your Hate, the ANCAP Barbershop, and a few more. So libertarianunion.com. I think that if I had to have a legacy right now, I think that might be it.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm super happy to be a part of the Libertarian Union, and yeah, Battle for Liberty. I'm having Mike Tilden on tomorrow. Well, we're recording it tomorrow, and that'll be, excuse me, that'll be, so the first week I have a full week, but my second week, it's going to be women in libertarianism. So I have 5 women, 5 different days. I'm going to have Dr. Mary Ruwert at the end of that week. So that's just going to be awesome. Super excited for that. The following week, Mike Tilden's going to be on. And as you know, he's an ex-police officer, so I'm super excited to hear his stories and experiences. But yeah, I mean, we could probably keep this going for like 3 more hours and do it Joe Rogan style. But is there anything else you'd like to plug into the show? Because I do eventually want to talk about the Rothbard Repository, because in my opinion, this is your biggest accomplishment, but to each their own. But what you've done with that, I mean, you literally have a site where you can type in any thing you're talking about. Let's say you want to look up Austrian economics, and you type in the speech, and you can see where Murray Rothbard said it in a speech, and it'll take you to that point in a speech. And you have so much video of Murray that, I don't know, just talk about it, man. That's incredible.
So the repository, it's still sort of beta-ish, so it doesn't work like super great, but I had been gleaning content from all over the place and then creating videos and then posting them to the Read Rothbard YouTube channel. And then I had this software for a website that has a really nice keyword search feature of all of the content that you put up there. And so I was able to grab transcripts that I created through some software of every one of the Murray Rothbard speeches on this website. And then you can search in this keyword search bar and then open up the appropriate videos that get populated in your search. And then you can find the exact timestamp where he talked about whatever. So like taxi medallions is a good one, or the Flexner report in regards to the medical industry and regulation in those areas. But, I have like 100 hours or so of Murray talking, and it's just an amazing thing. It took, well, you said you didn't want to ask, but I'll tell you, it took me probably 3 or 4 months to put that together.
But just
And
you were working like nonstop.
yeah, I mean, a lot of it was, my computer processing for hours and hours.
Right.
But I'm pretty happy with it. It's it's behind a paywall. So if people want to support us on Patreon, or if they buy their Bluehost through us, or I think there's a couple of other methods, and you can find out what those methods are if they go to readrothbard.com/repository. I'll give you lifetime access to the repository.
That's definitely an amazing accomplishment, man. And I do want to touch on one subject before we go. I want to talk about Murray Rothbard. How did you find Murray? Because obviously you look right back here. I have every single Murray Rothbard book that's ever been written, except for maybe a few are scattered in my room that I'm actually reading right now. But I own them all. And how did you find Murray? Obviously Murray, along with Tom Woods and a few other people, are the reason I'm doing this right now. The reason that I have enough command of the facts that I can get up here and, with or without notes, I can just talk for a long, long time about certain things. So Murray Rothbard, man, how did you find him?
Well, I think it's an offshoot of the Ron Paul and my roommate in college, years later, of course. And then I did the Mises Institute course, and Murray's lectures are probably 5 of the 52 weeks. And they stand out, and they're all good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they're all good, and I really love the Ralph Raico ones and the Tom Woods ones. But Murray stood out, and he's a little hard to understand at first, but once you kind of get his accent and you get his cadence, you just crave more of him.
Exactly.
So that's what I did. I went out and got as much Murray as I could, and I've listened to each of those, I don't know, probably a dozen times. So I
was about to say, I mean, you've listened to more Murray Rothbard than, I don't know, some of the people at the Mises Institute who have actually met him in person. You listened to a ton of Rothbard, so good for you, man. I really appreciate all you've done, and surely a lot of other people do. So I'm going to link to a bunch of stuff. I'm going to link to actualanarchy.com. Going to link to readrothbard.com. Going to link to repository.readrothbard.com. Sorry, I just can't talk right now. I'm just so excited about Rothbard. But is there anything else you wanted to link to? What was the links for your Patreon and stuff again?
You can get to our Patreon at patreon.com/readrothbard, or readrothbard.com/Patreon, or actualanarchy.com/Patreon, and make it easy. They all go to the same place, so don't get confused. And then there is one other thing I do want to mention. I believe this episode's coming out on Tuesday. Is that right? Yep. March 6th. So at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, March 6th, we are launching a new show. It's called Boys Night Out. And essentially what it is it's our attempt to reintroduce guests back into our show format, because at the new year, we changed our traditional Actual Anarchy show where we talk about movies and had to eliminate guests so that we could concisely get our episodes completed. But we started pining for guests and missing having that interaction. So we're trying it out. It's a Google Hangout style conversation. It's going to live stream on YouTube. We're going to do Blade Runner 2049 with Sherry Voluntary and Kyle Mamounis. I think I'm saying his name right. So that's March 6th, 6 p.m. Pacific and 9 p.m. Eastern. And that can be found at the Actual Anarchy YouTube channel. So youtube.com/actualanarchy. So that'll be really, really fun. Oh, and one thing I want to add, it's called Boys Night Out because we are both the most restrictive show and the most accommodating show of all time. You must identify as a man or a boy during the duration of the show, either as a guest or a listener. All right? Must be a boy during the show, and it's going to go like an hour or two. And then once the show's over, and once you're done listening as a listener, you can revert back to whatever gender, sex, whatever you want to be. But during the show, you're a boy.
All right. I don't know if I mentioned this one point in the show, but I actually write for actualanarchy.com. So if you're interested in anything I've written, I know Dan's written some stuff. We have a lot of good writers on the site. So again, I'm going to link to actualanarchy.com, readrothbard.com, repository.readrothbard.com. And thanks a bunch, Dan, for coming on, man. I promised you'd be my first guest because you really got me started in what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, well, it looks great, and I wish you the best of luck, and I hope things go very well for you. I'm very excited.
All right, everybody. So we got Anthony Samaroff coming on tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. This is Steve and Clyde from the Peace and Liberty podcast. Have a good rest of your day. See you tomorrow. Hey, everyone. Please like, follow, donate, subscribe, and share. Any donations will be used to reach more people.